In the last few weeks, Jagex have given us a lot of information regarding future updates and their plans for future skilling contents in the game. So in this video, I'm going to go over one of the most recent posts regarding, again, the future skilling content of the game and what I got from it. So as you go through the post, you start realizing that a lot of things don't necessarily add up, or they don't necessarily make sense, depending on your point of view. But for me, I found it very difficult to keep track of what they're actually trying to do. Oh, sorry about that. And the first thing that they brought up is improving our skilling content. Now this is relatively interesting because they mention here that the majority of active players still aren't maxed. Now what does this mean? Does this mean the majority of players don't have 99 in all skills, or does it mean that majority of players don't necessarily have 99 and 120s? This is a pretty vague statement, but it's important to keep this in mind because later on they mention one of the tricky challenges that they have, if I can find it, is players who are maxed, or players who do have 120 and 200 middle all skill, get bored of the game relatively quickly. And because of that, it's hard for them to make content for that particular player group. And they use the example at the end about the Fort for Free, right? And how endgame players just blasted through that. And that's a problem, in my opinion, because these endgame players generally have already beaten the game, right? 200 mil is the cap on XP. Yes, we can go above that. And yes, you have alluded to the fact that you can do that. However, these players have already beaten the game. And one thing that I want to point out is, what does the player's journey look like? Because 99 for a lot of skills is the end. And a lot of these older skills end at 99. And it's really hard to get players like they mentioned earlier, right? Majority of players still aren't maxed to get them to go past that point, mainly because of lack of content available and mainly lack of interest for that content, right? And because of this, I think when you're talking about improving the skilling content, I think we need to contextualize that within improving the RuneScape player journeys. Because I think for a long time now, I have been very dissatisfied with how Jagex approach a lot of their content, because it seems to me that they don't necessarily understand what that journey looks like from a new player all the way to an endgame player. It seems to me they're picking and choosing certain areas that they think is important or is interesting, whereas it doesn't necessarily flow very well. Like, it's a little choppy in certain areas, particularly with PVMing, as that is one of the core pillars of the game. Another core pillar of the game would be questing. That's a bit choppy, right? We don't necessarily get new storylines coming in. Stuff like this that we really need, before we go into improving the skilling content journeys, we need to understand what that journey is. And within this opening statement, it's already all over the place. On one hand, you're telling everyone that not everyone's maxed, but then on the other hand, you're saying that the majority of players who have trouble with the game are already at that point where they've beaten the game and they have nothing to do and they can get through that content immediately, and it's no fun, right? They use the example of the Fort for Free, because players could just get through that because guess what? They already had the skill, that they already had the 99, they already had the 120s, whatever. And the point here is that Fort for Free, that particular skilling content, wasn't designed for those players. So we shouldn't necessarily take their criticism, or like we should understand why they are frustrated, but we shouldn't necessarily use that to justify ignoring early game, mid game, any of these core parts of a player's journey's progression, because they are essentially at the end game already. So it seems to me that because they want to target these end game players who have already beaten the game, which is pretty redundant, they want to raise the skill cap for skills that go past 99 to 110. Now on the surface, that sounds okay, right? But again, like I mentioned earlier, what is the player's journey? What does that look like? Right? Do players necessarily want to just do more of the same thing over and over again, just for a higher level? I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think we need to reevaluate what a post-99 skill looks like and determine whether or not a 110 is appropriate. Because I don't necessarily think 110 is appropriate, right? Even they don't seem sure about this, because they even go through this process here and say, why not 120 though? And the justification is, we want to build up content, right? And pretty much what they are saying between these two paragraphs statements is that they found a lot of problems with the game, mainly due to the fact that the game has evolved, and because of that, fast experience rates have been introduced, and that has essentially messed up the game. And what they want to do is they want to get the game back on track. Right? They want to make it more akin to OSRS, where you have passive training methods and active training methods. Whereas passive training methods give less XP, but more convenient for a player. But active training methods give more XP but are more difficult. Right? They want to do that. And what they said is that when Prif released, that introduced a lot of these skilling methods, these passive training methods that players gravitate towards, and it became really difficult for them to release more active training methods. Now, I hope you can follow along here, but just because a passive training method outperforms an active training method doesn't mean you have to go ahead and introduce new skill level to 110. This is basically a balancing issue here. Jagex are refusing, this is from my point of view, that they are refusing to go back to where the problems are and fixing them. And even in this post they mentioned about the mining and spiffing rework and how difficult that was to do, mainly because they had to go back through the game and re-level everything and make sure everything was in the right place. And that was the time-consuming part about the mining and spiffing rework. And they just don't necessarily want to do that tedious, laborious activity again. Instead, they just carry on from 110, carry on from 99 to 110, and then 120 eventually. But the problem here is, like, we go all the way back to the opening paragraph, and we go here, right? Active players still aren't maxed. They still aren't maxed. So how are you going to get them there? You are proposing new content for players who aren't at that level yet. And you are targeting players who have already surpassed that level because they've went for 120s, they went for 200 mil all skills. That is the target audience that you are proposing these changes for. It doesn't necessarily line up. And you're using weak justification, in my opinion, because the rebuttal to this would be just go back and nerf these XP rates for these active training these passive training methods that are causing all these problems, and you can't make content around. Right? That's all you have to do. But you're not doing that. And it gets really frustrating reading through this because, like, well, what's going on here? Who are you targeting? What are you aiming for? It seems like it's all over the place. And as you go down the post, what you realize that it's kind of confusing because then they're proposing there'll be no new training methods, which again it comes back to what I said earlier about the player's journey, right? What's going to incentivize players to go past 99? If it's more of the same thing, then they're probably not going to do it because you've had like 20 years to do so. Players still aren't maxed. And again, if by your new training methods you mean brand new kind of gameplay, then the default answer for us would be no. Right? This doesn't seem like they know what they are doing. And it's like, oh, let's tell the community this is what we're planning. All right, that's fine. But you have no kind of systematic approach to what you want to do and why you're going to do it. And because of that, they propose these changes for 110, and they don't even know what the rewards are. What about the capes, right? Will there be new capes? Again, they have no idea what they're doing. And an easy answer to this, right, if they did know, which would be to give them the Fresh Start World capes, recolors, right? That would be an easy reward. That would work really well for this, and I think it'll be perfectly fine. But again, they don't even bring this up. It's so confusing when you read it. Because one thing that I noticed for the last 4 months is that players want content, but they don't necessarily want to think about the consequences of adding that content to the game, right? They're so hungry for content, they don't necessarily realize, wait, is this good for the game? Is this healthy for the game? Because you should never let the prisoners run the asylum, right? That's what OSRS does. I don't think it's a good idea. I think OSRS has missed out on a lot of good updates just because of the polling system, and it seems to me that Jagex are kind of gravitating more towards that instead of just having a stance. Right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try this. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. We'll hopefully fix it. Right, we'll buff, nerf, do whatever we need to do to fix it. But Jagex don't do that, and that's where the frustrating part comes into it. Because I use this as an example all the time, but Anime Dead, Crit Bloom, FSOA, all came out in 4 months, right, in a 4-month window. They were broken on release. Players immediately figured that out. It took Jagex over a year to respond to that and make changes. Like, this is not acceptable at all. And instead of actually being like, okay, well, this didn't work and it didn't work for this reason, let's fix this, they're just like, oh, let's just move on to the next thing. And that's what causes all these problems in the game, right? That's what causes combat problems, because you just want to constantly keep adding new PVM content into the game to appease these endgame players, instead of actually thinking, wait, was that a good update? Was God was to really necessary? Was Elite Dungeons 1, 2, like, are they all necessary with the reward system that they offer? I mean, you just go over all these things that have happened over the years in the game and you realize that nothing is changing, and you want the game to do better. You want people to actually make the game more appeasing and appealing for new players, make content creators more likely to make content more active series, and build up the community. You want to do that. But it seems to me that Jagex doesn't know what they want to do. And that's partly because, investment companies come in and out, development staff changes, all this type of things, but there is no foundation here. So I hope that Jagex actually do have a foundation, because this is not looking promising, at least from my point of view. And then finally, we are here. Demonheim mining and smithing, right? So the justification for this was similar to the justification for releasing Necromancy before the combat beta rework, right? For the hit cap changes. It's pretty much the same thing. The issue I have with this is similar to this entire video where I've mentioned it like 3 or 4 times now, which is, what is a player's journey? Because mining and smithing are 2 skills that are joined to the hip, and they interact with melee predominantly. And because of that, I think a 120 journey, a post 99 journey, should be an elite skill that uses mining, smithing, attack, strength, and defense. Maybe not defense, but I think an elite skill would actually fix a lot of these issues. It would offer them the runway that they need to add new and exciting content. It will build towards players getting 99 sooner and get max faster. I think the solution is not to release 110 skills, but to release another elite skill, right? Back when Invention was released, this was a big talking point, like, oh, maybe we'll do another elite skill. They never did. But it seems to me like an elite skill will solve a lot of these issues. And yes, I can go over all of these changes, right? I can go over the Demonheim rewards, the tank armor, the weapons, masterwork, 2-handed swords. I can go over all of this. I'm just not sold on this idea. I would much rather prefer an elite skill that focuses on mining, smithing, attack and strength, right? And make it into some sort of like class, like a warrior, that starts with, like, instead of like 80 requirements, like with Invention, you have 70 requirements. I think that would work better. Again, you'd still be able to introduce all these same rewards. You'll still be able to go all the way to 110, 120, and it will essentially fix the game. I think that's what you should do. At least that's what I would like to see from the game. However, I am not sold from this news post, where I know I'm all over the place, and I probably haven't explained myself the best, but I am not sold on this right now. I'm not sold on the fact that we are having skills that just constantly go up and up and up without no change in gameplay. I am not sold on the fact that passive skilling methods have been in the game for so long that completely power creep the game, and Jagex have completely ignored them and didn't even bother nerfing them. I'm not sold on the fact that, Big Game Hunter, which I really enjoyed, is not talked about enough, and that playstyle isn't necessarily added back into the game in other areas, right? It's like when you talk about these things, I don't want to be negative all the time, but it seems to me that maybe I'm just not seeing it, or maybe I'm the outcast. I'm not sure, but I'm not left with confidence here. Maybe if I can talk to a JMod, that'll be fine. Who can explain this to me? But I don't see the future for skill. I don't see the future for skilling. So hopefully, if anyone's watched this, give me your feedback, because I don't think 110, skills are the way forward. I think we need to go to elite skills. I think that's the best structure overall, instead of just constantly just adding in God knows what every now and then and hoping the players will bite.